Hey, it's Claire for the Daily. I'd like to apologise for the dreadful quality of the video and the stream yesterday. I don't know what I've got OBS set wrong or how I've got it set, but it was horrid, blocky quality. So I'm using Shadowplay. I'm not streaming it at the moment. I think I'm going to just record a lot more YouTube at the moment, though I really like doing live stuff. So I need to go onto the forums, potentially figure out what's a good set of settings, because my settings were not working at all. It just wasn't doing, so depending on how much you know about codecs, but a codec is basically all about storing information in smaller bits, mostly through mathematical formulae. So obviously there's some quality loss unless you're doing lossy compression, but to be honest, video you usually want to use some kind of lossy compression, especially with bit rates and streaming and whatnot, because you generally want to keep it under 1,000 kilobits per second in terms of data. But anyway, long story short, there is a whole range of techniques that they use, color restriction and all sorts of things. Very, very complicated. However, like one of the key methods is the keyframe differential. So you take a keyframe, whatever changes in the keyframe you store, and you only take a keyframe every so often to avoid drift, because otherwise you get a horrible drift and the math just doesn't work out. So anyway, and especially if you're scrubbing or scanning a video. So anyway, one of the techniques, other than just simplistic comparison of which pixels changed every frame, is to look at Damsel Destroyer. Is to look at the panning of the thing. So if I run left to right or right to left, it's very predictable in how the video changes. Like little bits change, but you can essentially grab in the bits from the side and you can scroll the image, if you will, and you detect this through a bunch of math, well-established computer vision problem, and you just save it as a thing saying thing. But now, if you're just detecting panning left and right, that's what we call 1 degree of freedom. So you're moving left and right, so that's 1 degree. But then if you decide, oh well, I'm going to detect, okay, let's kill you. Boom. Oh, bollocks! His gun and him landed in the same place. Oh! Okay, I'm going to do a quick post-daily run because I'm having fun talking about what I'm talking about, and I want to finish the topic, and that was terrible. So I'll just do one quick run now. So anyway, 1 degree of freedom is panning left and right. So 2nd degree of freedom would be panning up and down. And then you can introduce a 3rd degree of freedom when you detect things like zooming in and zooming out. And you can detect another degree of freedom if the image is rolling. Another degree of freedom if the image is tilting. So like if you point a camera up or down, there's like a perspective tilt that happens that you can do. And using all of these kind of mathematical transformations of the image, you can reduce the amount of data that needs to be kept because the differential is smaller. Especially if it's a YouTube video of a camera taking a bunch of okay, let's see if I can do this. Hey! Especially if it's a picture of a camera taking a bunch of shots of still, like a video of environment, because then once you've computed the translation and motion and stuff of the camera, you can store it mostly as just translational or projection changes, which mathematically really boil down really well. So how do you do this? Well, there's a variety of techniques. One of the most common forms of technique is looking for landmarks in the image. Now, landmarks like pointers you can identify, especially being able to identify how those pointers. Oh, I need to get her. How those pointers change frame to frame. So, for instance, detecting a window and detecting how a window shape transforms or a box shape transforms is a fairly well studied area. One of the most common techniques is to check for edges or structure, what they call structural definition. So because most of the study of the area is obviously in real photography, because that's the most common kind of film you compress, and in real life the most common light source that you're dealing with is the sun, and if you're not dealing with the sun, you're usually dealing with overhead lights. So obviously the sun's overhead usually, so it's quite common that you have a singular defining light source that are defining most light and shadow in the image, and so you can picture out structural differences by looking at where you've got a high contrast area, because like if it's a window, for example, the top bit of the window is dark and depressed, and you can kind of get some structural form out of the image that way, and you can use it to build up your motion map as a marker. Other things are distinctive elements of color. So if you've got a bit of red in the video that really stands out, that's a good one. But obviously every one of these techniques has a cost. So if you so there's two costs. So obviously the cost of how much data has to be used in the stream, right? Fully uncompressed being the most data, and how much. Okay, see, I'm good at killing shopkeepers now, but see, I've really got to work on this technique. One more game, and we'll just finish talking about the topic at hand. So, oh bollocks. You know what? Let's just quickly kill him, and we'll start again. Seeing it's not daily. So anyway, the most common, so fully uncompressed video, which you almost never really get, even straight off the camera, because raw video is just so expensive. But anyway, so you get fully uncompressed video on the one side, and then you get highly complex mathematical encryptions, which take a lot of processor power to decrypt. Now, the equation of how expensive it is to encode or how expensive it is to decode footage isn't as simple as you would think. For instance, you could have really mathematically complex CPU intensive stuff that, you know, starves the processor. But then what happens, let's say your restriction is that you're using a computer that's kind of old, and so it doesn't have, or you're using a low powered device like a portable DVD player or something like that. It might not have a lot of CPU power, but the thing is that if you aren't using the transmission rate of the disk, you know, like for instance, let's say the hard drive can read, let's go for an arbitrary number that's probably wrong, 5,000 kilobits per second. Oh shit, I thought you had already taken an arrow. 5,000 kilobits per second, right? Then any mathematical compression beyond that point becomes kind of mute, and you've got the whole issue of streaming. But now with encoding, God, sorry. Now with encoding, you've got the problem of it's not just about decoding the it's not just about decoding the stream. No, that is an element, especially if you're dealing with embedded flash video players and stuff that don't necessarily have full access to the raw power of the computer, depending on hardware settings and platform settings, and it all gets a bit of a mire of confusion. Your biggest problem is your upload speed, and that's really restrictive in a lot of cases, and your down speed. So this is why YouTube, for instance, has invented tons of new algorithms to compress down video, and they're doing some really interesting stuff, and Google's published some wonderful papers on this and talks at Google I/O and stuff you can read up on and such. So anyway, long-winded way to say figuring out how much processor you can spare for encoding on your computer that doesn't impact game performance. And also, it's not just about not impacting game performance, but it's what's the latency, because a lot of these methods need to analyze multiple frames to be useful. Like, you can't predict where a camera is going to go. So what happens there is there's a latency inherent, not even to just how fast you can process it, but how many frames you need to analyze motion. So to figure out whether it's worth it. So you introduce a latency for the encoding, which obviously is why when you're streaming you get so close. Why when you're streaming you get quite a significant delay from, you know, and it's not just, you know, uploading, because uploading your latency is going to be low. It's going to be like 50, 80 milliseconds, somewhere like that. Whereas your downloads, you know, maybe going to be 100 milliseconds or something. So it's not the latency, it's the pure encoding on your side, decoding on the receiver's side. And in a case like Twitch, there's a bunch of carrier stuff that happens on the server, you know, distributing and breaking out. It's mostly a computational problem. So why is this all so tricky? Well, the first thing is that most of the defaults of most codecs, like H.264, which is the most common, are set up in such a way to handle realistic looking footage. And this is, you know, less appropriate for games because, for instance, games we have a lot of static HUD elements. We also, in the case of games like Spelunky, have a limited palette. And we have a lot more. So, okay, remember how I was talking about degrees of freedom and translational encoding? So encoding how the camera is moving about the place. See, I can do it. I can kill the fucking shopkeeper. You think? So annoying that I screwed that up. And I got the gloves. Wow. So anyway, there's another bit of that encoding that you can do, which is also another thing that takes more processor power, not only to do, but to detect, which is in-frame movement. So like, for instance, when this guy's jumping about the place, right? Or when some element on the screen is moving, translating around the screen, you can literally track how that element's moving. And you can do some interesting encoding with that kind of data. So there's that. Now, I'm not au fait with what forms of encoding H.264 supports and what it doesn't. So I'm not sure if there's stuff's even using that, but it's one of the problems. So this was one of the things that came up with StarCraft streaming, and they're like, well, what codecs can we use, and you know, how can we get the best quality and such. So yes, in the case of, because for instance, if you're shooting realistic footage, the blockiness that you saw on yesterday's stream, it's actually a fairly effective way of dealing with it, because, you know, it doesn't look too bad. But in the case of what happened in my stream yesterday, is this background with all this lovely blue stone and stuff reads really badly. And while the main motion of the Spelunky dude comes out and he gets, you know, quite a bit of clarity in a lot of the frames, it just doesn't scan well. And for instance, elements of the HUD like text compress really badly when exposed to JPEG style artifacts where you're trying to block down the color and such. So yeah, that's the key problem, is most of these math formulas and most of these encoding systems have been written with realistic imagery in mind. And when you put these systems onto when you put these systems onto cartoons, like animated films and stuff, and try and encode that, it's a whole different set of encoding norms that you really want to use. I wonder if I can push this without... There we go. Where is the damsel? Oh, there she is. Okay, so Kalialt is at the top. We're good for time. Yeah, so, so yeah, that's kind of the whole encoding entail. I mean, obviously there's a lot more details, and I encourage you, if you're interested in stuff, to look into it. Like, one of the rules that we often find is that sometimes brute force is more efficient than all of these maths and stuff, because by the time you've done all this weird analysis and all this elimination of possibilities, you're like, well, fuck, that took, you know, this many milliseconds, and I could have just brute forced this fucker in less time. So the pure math, it's funny how sometimes the pure math just gets thrown out the window for really brute force approach for detecting stuff. It's not only video encoding, it's also, if you look at, our key was over here, yeah, there we go. If you look at, I'm going to use this rope. Come up here, fuck off, down. Yeah, so a lot of the same techniques that are used in video are also used in image encoding. So like, you got your PNGs and your JPEGs and stuff like that. But to be honest, I don't even know so we're talking about, because most people understand how that stuff works, right? Or is it just computer science class? So, like, everyone knows how a GIF works with its limited color palettes and everything, right? And a GIF uses the same kind of keyframe techniques. I mean, talking of GIF is a horrible format. It's so horribly out of date. WebM, the WebM encoding and the web image stuff that Google's put forward is really, really good. And apparently it has an animation spec planned, but there's a lot of disagreement on the implementation. It's all open. That's the other joy, right? There's a lot of these formats, a lot of this stuff you can talk about. If you Google it, you can usually find the old BBS thread or the old email discussion where all of this was publicly discussed and, you know, where standards were set. Unfortunately, it's also an area where patent law gets really hard. So, like, Apple own a lot of video encoding tech. They're not the only ones. I'm trying to remember who owns H.264. Pretty terrible though, and the licensing stuff gets really messy. So it was really interesting. Google and a few others, Firefox and some others, set up a thing where they were like, we want to do a movie format, and we want to do a picture and movie format stuff that people can freely use without licensing concerns, and there's a whole big push on it. Mostly for browsers, because browsers have to pay crazy money to use various encoding Sorry, I was distracted by the shopkeeper. Yeah, browsers and other companies have to pay crazy money. Like, the licensing stuff gets really complex, and I don't even want to try to talk about it because it bends my brain, to be completely honest with you. It's not an area anyone without a law degree should even think of trying to dive into. It's so messy. And I got the Capella. I'm happy with that. You know what? I was thinking about getting the thing up there, but I'm not going to. So this is not the daily. This is just some runs afterwards, because I was talking about something that I'm really interested in talking about, and let's be frank, the main reason I do this video is for myself and for just like a sort of journal thing and just a diary and getting where my head is at. Oh, speaking of which, I went to a little mini role-playing thing today in Portsmouth. That was kind of fun. It was very small. It's been organised by a few role players, and they rented out a space to run some run some games in. Ooh, nice. Oh, man. What do I do? Bloody tiki traps. No one likes a tiki trap. Why am I burning through this mattock? Because I'll never carry the mattock to the next level. The shotgun's too useful. I've got mad shopkeepers on my ass. So, no way that I... Your pay for your crimes almost suggests to me that I've already got him because the music's not playing. Oh, no, there's music. And there's the music stopping. Let's go grab the damsel. And then we're going to mattock this entire area. Goodbye, Ghosty. So that was kind of fun. I played a Doctor Who versus Halloween game where freeform storytelling, and we're just sort of, I played Matt Smith's Doctor, and we had Rory. We didn't have Amy. I know, kind of funny, but I was like, oh, I want to be the Doctor, and I was like, oh, do you want to play Matt Smith's Doctor? And I was like, oh. I kind of thought to myself, oh, I kind of want to play a female Doctor, and then I was just like, no, I'm not even going to go there. I don't want to upset Doctor Who fans. Fuck you! So anyway, so I did that, and then one of the guys was like, oh no, I'll play this golem, and we went to Viking village. We did all this crazy stuff and hell and all this jazz, and we saved everyone by spiking a large amount of beer. Anyway, thank you for my post-daily fun and jazz and whatnot, and I'll see you when I see you. Oh, hello. Ta-ta.